And we kick off this evening with a look at the cinema.
I'm not a complicated man. I like cinema.
It's beautiful, beautiful cinema.
Cinema history come to life.
I found my solace in the small cinema I went to every Thursday night.
I'm a professor of cinema.
I go to the cinema for the stories.
There was no competition between the cinema and seminar.
I mean, it's not within the realm of conventional cinema.
And now,
here's Pace and Johnson
with a cinema review.
It is Monday, 7 EST, November 25th, and thank you for joining me for another episode of Cinemaster's Reviews. Took the last couple weeks off. I just had some important, just personal things I had to deal with. Didn't just have a chance to review movies. But with us coming off such a big weekend as this week, I really wanted to be able to talk about both the big releases this week, that being Wicked and Gladiator 2. I know some people have related this week to last year when Barbie and Oppenheimer came out in the same week. They're calling this weekend Glicked. I think that's a little forced, but I just wanted to mention it. I think that's kind of fun. It's always fun to see so many people at the theaters celebrating multiple movies. I say we jump right into a review, that being the first movie we're going to be talking about, Wicked, directed by John M. Chu. This is based off the musical written by Stephen Schwartz. It is a prequel to The Wizard of Oz, centering on the character of the Wicked Witch of the West. In this film, we learn her real name is Elphaba, played by Cynthia Erivo, as well as Glinda the Good Witch, played by Ariana Grande. We essentially learn how these two met, how they were initially friends, how when they were in school, it seemed like the school was a little bit more attracted towards Elphaba as a witch to see what her powers can be. Elphaba really wants to meet the wizard, learn why she has these powers, why her skin is green. When Glinda and Elphaba first meet, they obviously aren't great friends, and they slowly learn to connect, and realizing that they're not all that different, even though they look different. There are issues in the world of Oz, whether or not it's animals being believed that the wizard, some people want to control animals though and take away their ability to speak. I'm going to assume you've probably seen The Wizard of Oz. I'm going to assume you know the story of The Wizard of Oz. This takes place before Dorothy gets to Oz. If you haven't seen the musical Wicked, I think it is an excellent, excellent musical. It sounds a little silly when you're explaining it to people of, oh, this is the story, this is the origin story of how the Wicked Witch of the West became evil, or how she became or how she became hated. And I don't really think that's the best pitch. I think it's just, how did this one person, Elphaba, become this infamous figure of the Wicked Witch of the West? And I just think it's a really, really unique story. I think the music is excellent by Stephen Schwartz. And I was a little skeptical going into this movie. I wasn't sure if John M. Chu, who had directed musicals I love, such as 2021's In the Heights, I wasn't sure how he was going to be able to pull it off, especially knowing that this is only adapting the first half of the musical and it's still going to be the length of the full musical. I wasn't sure how Ariana Grande was going to be able to pull off the character of Glinda, because I've only really seen her on the Nickelodeon show Victorious. I didn't really know if she had super strong acting capabilities. And I will say, every single fear I had going into this movie, completely proven wrong. John M. Chu, as far as I am concerned, he has proven himself with both this and In the Heights as the king of directing modern day musicals. Like, if there was a musical that Hollywood is having a tough time cracking, trying to figure out how to make a big screen adaptation of it, give it to John M. Chu. If it has big dancing numbers, if it has just this giant sense of scale, I think he's going to find a way to present that in a really cool way and still get down and really get down to the nitty-gritty details of these character interactions, which is what I think makes this movie so special. Is as great as all the sets are and all the costumes and all the music is, it never forgets that this is a story about these two characters meeting and how they interact with each other and how both of them change each other for the better and for the worse in certain ways. Just to talk about some other things I really love. It takes the best aspects of the musical and why we love seeing all this stuff on stage and making it super cinematic. Every single musical number, John M. Chu should get a medal for how well done every number is. Whether it's popular, whether it's One Short Day, whether it's Loathing, whether it's the big one, Defying Gravity. Hearing that this movie is only the first act of the show, you probably know that this movie ends on Defying Gravity. And honestly, like in Wicked, that is the best musical number. That is the best scene of this movie. Like this movie ends on such a high note with everything that happens in that musical number. Again, I don't want to spoil what happens in this movie in case you haven't seen the musical, but I think you just have these incredible images. Even something like with the musical, where in the play Wicked, when you're watching Defying Gravity, what you're seeing is Elphaba fly for the first time. In a movie format, it's like, well, we've seen movie characters fly all the time. How is this going to be impressive? Chu ends up making that look so good, and genuinely, like as I was watching it, the hairs were standing up on my arms, and I think it's just so incredible with how well he's able to translate all these certain things. He gives certain characters a little bit more backstory, like Bach, the character from Munchkinland. We don't really have a ton of backstory on him in the musical. This one does a lot. Gives us a lot of information, and normally I would kind of roll my eyes about that, like, do I really need it? But Chu ends up making that stuff to flesh this out to an even longer movie. He ends up making that feel a little bit more interesting. Maybe if I were nitpicking, it's maybe like a little tad bloated. Like you maybe could have gotten this down to like 2 hours and 20 minutes, 2 hours and 15 minutes. But I think at the end of the day, I think it uses its pace really well, and it does a great job at telling this first act of the story wonderfully. Both of the leads, Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande, I think are absolutely excellent. I'm just gonna take Cynthia Erivo, she's really famous for her Broadway performances and her singing ability. I think going into this movie, I think everyone knew she was going to be really, really great as Elphaba, and I think she does a great job. She does such a good job of just acting with her eyes. Like there's so much pain that the character of Elphaba carries in her face, and Cynthia Erivo is able to really, really portray that in an excellent way. And then, yeah, she just has such an incredible singing voice. Like all the musical numbers, it's insane what this woman can do with her vocal range. I think that's absolutely incredible. Elphaba is just such an interesting character where like she's born into this world in the worst circumstances, but she doesn't have like this super cynical look on the outside world. She just wants to do good. And I think it's just fun just following her. But man, like going to this movie, like I said, I wasn't sure how Ariana Grande was going to be able to pull off the role of Glinda. Probably my favorite performance in the movie. I think she is absolutely astounding in this film. When we first meet her, like she is such like this like rich goody two shoes girl, and you automatically like kind of just immediately dislike her. And then just as the movie starts to go on, you start to see how she also isn't perfect, how she also has like issues. And just her friendship with Elphaba just billowing and just bubbling up, I think is super fun. Ariana Grande does such a great job at blending the ditzy nature of this character with the really charming nature, and like that is such a tough line sometimes to balance. And Grande does such a perfect job. Like when you hit the popular musical number, this is probably the moment in the movie where like you're finally supposed to go over the edge of like, okay, you're supposed to like Linda now, and she does such a good job at selling that. Just like Erivo, she also has a beautiful voice, and I think she nails all the singing elements. But just like as this movie goes on, how Grande just really portrays like she wants to be well liked by every single person in the Witch Academy, I think is just super fun, and I think she is the standout of this movie. The entire supporting cast also does a great job. Shout out to Jonathan Bailey. He plays Fior, a young prince that ends up attending the school. He's really great at like being like this really preppy character, but also like the way how Bailey portrays it, you can clearly tell he doesn't like where he is, and there's something more underneath him that he also has an issue with everything that's going on in Ozland. Peter Dinklage is great as the goat professor. I think he is really fun. Jeff Goldblum every time this guy, like, I shouldn't have to tell you how charming Jeff Goldblum is, and the movie does a great job at using him as the Wizard. If you've seen The Wizard of Oz, you know the Wizard isn't the greatest guy in the world. He's sort of like this master of tricks, and Jeff Goldblum does a great job of showing like how this guy's been able to manipulate the world to believing he's this ultimate ruler when really he's just, there's nothing really special about him. Michelle Yeoh is great as Elphaba's teacher. I think Michelle Yeoh is really great as playing this character of authority, but also you know that there's something sinister going on with her, and I think that was really, really fun. So yeah, the whole supporting cast is great. From a technical from a technical aspect, I think this movie is a marvel. The production design of Ozland, I think it does a perfect job at capturing how the original Wizard of Oz film looked, but like updating it to a modern time. This movie does have a lot of CGI, but it also blends a lot with practical effects. Everything with the Shiz Academy, which is what the Academy is called. Trust me, I kind of laughed when I remembered that the Academy is called the Shiz Academy, but whatever. Like with the Academy, with Ozland, different parts. When you get to the Emerald City, I think it's gorgeous. Like all the production is great. The costumes are what you would expect. From the musical. It does a great job at capturing that famous iconography of the Wizard of Oz. I loved how they updated what the Wizard now looks like. Obviously, from the Wizard of Oz, it's just like a projected face of I believe it's Ed Wynn who played the Wizard. Frank Morgan who played the Wizard, and this one makes it a little bit more like a robotic face, and I think that was really, really great. How this movie handles all the animals, I think, is excellent. Honestly, I'm reviewing 2 movies this week that has CGI animals. I think the CGI animals in this movie honestly looked a little better, even though they're not supposed to be like super realistic looking. And that could be why, but I'll get to that when I talk about Gladiator 2. But yeah, I think all the technical aspects are excellent, and even though this ends where you would have an intermission with the Broadway show, even though this ends and has a big to be continued thing, right where all of our emotions are so high, it still feels like a complete story. Like Elphaba starts in one spot and then she ends in a completely different spot. Like her journey, like she has an arc. Glinda has an arc, and I think the argument of whether or not this feels like a complete story is going to be thrown around. I do think it pulls this off. Like I don't think this needs to be called Wicked Part 1. I think it earned just to be called Wicked. And I want to give John M. Chu credit for, even though he isn't just adapting half a musical, being able to make it feel like a complete story. So if I were to rate this movie on a scale of 0 to 10 videotapes, honestly, this is some of the most fun I've had in the theater this year. I'm going very high. I'm going 9.5 videotapes out of 10. This is practically everything I could have asked for from a Wicked adaptation. Incredible musical numbers, looks beautiful. Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande killing it in these legendary roles of Elphaba and Glinda, and it gets me so excited for what for next year when Wicked Part 2 comes out. I'm just excited to see what John M. Chu does with the second half of this story. I couldn't recommend you go see this in the theater more. I think it looks gorgeous. I think it's going to really it is really going to help seeing this in a big theater, and I would really recommend you see this if you're able to get out to the theaters to go see this. Yeah, really loved Wicked. But yeah, let's jump into the other movie this week, that being Gladiator 2. This is the sequel to Ridley Scott's original film Gladiator, released in 2000. Ridley Scott also directed this. This takes place 16 years after the death of Maximus in the first Gladiator, and we learn that Rome has fallen and is now being ruled by two corrupt emperors, and only a few settlements are carrying the will of the original emperor Marcus Aurelius, and another general played by Pedro Pascal is sort of conquering these regions and getting them to bow down to Rome, so that way they have full unity in this country. I'm just going to pull up character names just to make sure. This general is played by Pedro Pascal. His name is General Accius. And he's sort of like the hero of New Rome. And one of the leaders of the settlements only goes by the name of Hallo, played by Paul Mescal. He is at the beginning of the film. He's leading this final defense against this siege from General Accius, and what do you know it? He gets captured and he has to fight through his ranks to become a gladiator in order to gain revenge for his people. Some secrets are revealed about Halo as the movie keeps going on. He gets bought by a slave master by the name of Macrinus, played by Denzel Washington. The first thing I just want to say about this movie, one, I love the first Gladiator. I think it is an incredible film. I think there are a few movies released this century that look as just unique and look as like grand and historical as that first movie does, while also not forgetting to be a really cool like character story about this man seeking revenge, about finding a purpose after his family is murdered. Without spoiling too much, this movie goes on very similar beats. And if you've seen Star Wars The Force Awakens, or if you've seen Creed, this is definitely a legacy sequel that takes a lot, and I mean a lot, of story beats from that original movie. And it took me a while to realize that Ridley Scott was going to be treading a lot of familiar water through this movie, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't annoy me at first. When this movie was announced, I was really kind of puzzled, like, why do we need a sequel to Gladiator? And for the first 30 minutes, I was kind of like, I'm liking what I'm seeing, but this is so similar to that first Gladiator film. So I think if you know that this is going to be, I hate to use this word, but kind of a retread of the original Gladiator, I think if you simply accept that and just enjoy the movie for what you are going to get, I think you are going to enjoy it more. But that's not to say I didn't like this movie, because I do think it was very good. I think Ridley Scott, like I think I said this when I reviewed Napoleon, Ridley Scott just does such a great job of making his movies feel big. Like the way how he was able to rebuild ancient Rome and make it look this grand and make it look this huge. And when you're in the Colosseum, you feel the scale and you feel how just like small human beings are compared to this huge city. I think it's just so impressive, and Ridley Scott is always so great at doing that. When you have scenes where you have water in the Colosseum, I think it looks incredible. All these characters in these great costumes. The two emperors, played by Joseph Quinn and Fred Hetchinger. Both of these guys are like the most evil and like conniving little shits I think you could ask for, and just they're in this like white face paint makeup, and I think that's really fun. All the costumes, like eventually Macrinus gets this great white robe, and I think that's super fun. Just Ridley Scott just has such a fine nose for detail, and I think that is all over Gladiator 2. All the performances are great. I think Paul Mescal is like one of my favorite actors, like new actors working right now. I loved him in Aftersun. I loved him in All of Us Strangers. This is the first like major blockbuster I'm seeing him in, and if he's gonna be like this action star, I think he can do it in these like really cool like thinking man action movies. He pulls it off. Pedro Pascal, he just looks like a Roman gladiator as far as I'm concerned. And this little rivalry we have between Pascal and Mescal, I think is super fun. It also helps that like Pascal is not like a hateable character, because he's just one of those actors that like when you see his face, you just want to root for and you want to get behind. And I think that's super fun in how Ridley Scott is able to carry this. But the performance of the movie, if you've seen the trailers, you probably just loved. Like I think when this guy laughed, I think we all just got excited for this movie. Denzel Washington as Macrinus, I think, is so incredible. Denzel Washington turning in like, even for him, like one of the most charismatic performances of his life, and Denzel is like one of the best actors of all time as far as I'm concerned. And I don't want to spoil where this character goes, but when you first meet him, you can very clearly tell he's using Halo for his own resources, but there's also a little bit of a team up angle going, and how Denzel just plays everything so close to the chest, and you get why people would like this guy, but also why he doesn't have the respect he needs. Denzel just does such a good job at carrying the aura of this character, and he's easily my favorite performance of the film. All of the action scenes, they just feel epic, and they all feel different from one another. Like it starts with this giant siege led by Pedro Pascal's character, and then we go to all the characters fighting these baboons in the Colosseum. Then we get to a Colosseum battle, and then we get to a water Colosseum battle. Ridley Scott did such a great job at adding a lot of different like layers and adding a lot of variety to these action scenes. And I think that made the movie feel super fresh. And for a 2.5-hour movie, it honestly did just fly by, because I think all of the action and all of like the political manipulation, because there's a lot more of that than in the first Gladiator movie. And I think that was really fun. Yeah, I think all of that is handled really well, and the pacing is really, really expertly done. The visual effects are phenomenal of this film, minus some of the animals. You can very clearly tell the animals are CGI in this movie, and that was a little distracting at points. But aside from that, the fact the water in the Colosseum is not real. I did not know this until after the movie. I think that was really, really great by Scott. Connie Nielsen is back in this movie. She's completely de-aged. It's maybe some of the best de-aging I think I've seen in movie history. All the visual effects are great, except for those except for the animal effects. One of the technical aspects I wasn't the biggest fan of was the score by Harry Gregson Williams. It's not that it was a bad score. I think it just comes down to Hans Zimmer's score for that first Gladiator movie is so legendary, and there are just some of those themes that just feel a little bit absent and just make this movie feel like a hair less epic. And as I was watching that movie, I was like, man, I wish we had the music from the original Gladiator film. But this movie does have a lot of cool little like small references to that first Gladiator film. It does have a lot of archival footage, and I think that was really cool. Once you learn, without spoiling the third act of this movie, once you learn why certain characters are doing what they're doing, I think it ties into that first film really well. And I think Ridley Scott did a great job at knowing what to focus on and knowing what not to focus on. And it ends in a really, really satisfying way. Without getting too much into it, this one isn't like, I could see the potential for a Gladiator 3 a lot more than I saw the potential for a Gladiator 2 after this ending, but I do think it is a very satisfying and very emotional ending with where our characters end towards the finale of this film. If I were to rate this movie on a scale of 0 to 10 videotapes, I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. I think this is a very solid legacy sequel. I do have some issues with the movie, like I said earlier. It is a lot of it is a retread of the original film. Some of the CGI isn't the greatest, but man, when you have a director like Ridley Scott just going full Ridley and just making this feel just so huge, so epic, great performances, especially an all-timer from Denzel Washington, I can't help but be satisfied in what I just watched. I would also recommend going to see this movie in theaters. As we get towards the holiday season, it's really great that we have so many great and theatrical films that are fun to celebrate in the way that we should be watching movies, which is, as far as I'm concerned, in the theater. But thank you all for watching. Remember to like this video and subscribe to the video store. Thank you all for watching. Sorry I missed a couple weeks. Couldn't unfortunately do this live because, again, I had something that I wanted to go to, but happy I could at least find the time to record this. Next week, I'm going to be reviewing Moana 2 and September 5th. I hope you all have a great Thanksgiving weekend next week. It is Thanksgiving in America. But yeah, thank you all for watching. And remember, as always, watch more movies.
And the award for most vapid film review of the century goes to...
Okay, movie review. Okay, I thought it was beauty.
And he's now in cinema hell, where one day we'll all be reunited.
This is me at the Regal Cinema crying as I did through much of the film.